documenting the front lines of the AI revolution, the AI Rebels podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome again to another episode of the AI Rebels podcast. I, as always, am your co-host, Spencer, and I am here with Jacob.
And we are very excited to have Mike Spaeth here with us, who is the Global Vice President of the U.S. Artificial Intelligence Institute, which I'm sure there is so much baked into that title, Mike, and we are really excited to dig into it and the cause that you're supporting. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Thank you for coming on. We're really excited to have you.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. You know, as I was talking to you about before, I'm a big fan. Listened to the NASA session, and then also AI company with one employee was the other one.
Yes, yeah.
I spent a lot of time in the car. My son is on a travel basketball team, so
there you go.
we drove 14 hours, and you guys helped me along the way.
Glad we could help. That's a long drive.
Yeah. But you made it go faster. So
good.
Glad to hear it.
Well, tell us how you got to where you are, Mike. How'd you end up as the global VP of the U.S. Artificial Intelligence Institute? What brought you there?
Yeah, I was thinking about this journey before I got on here. The funny thing is, it started on a bring your son to work day, and this was like, I may have been 8 years old, and my dad took me to go see the mainframes in his office. This was like, I'm going to date myself through this whole thing, but this was when mainframes were the only option, right?
Yeah.
The days of big iron, and I was able to go in the room, and the room was gigantic, and kind of touch these huge machines in a refrigerated room, and it was after punch cards, but it was pretty cool to see. And then from there, I remember I saw Matthew Broderick movie called War Games, which was like an old movie, and then got hooked on Pac-Man and asteroids and Missile Command. And what's funny is that there was no AI then, because I remember playing Pac-Man, and if you basically knew the route, you could play forever. And the same with asteroids, right? There was no like, okay, we're going to make this random. It was basically like if you followed a certain path, you never lose. So and that's kind of where I got passionate about technology, and passionate about what the capabilities were. And then I was also thinking about my first job out of college. The laptops were kind of just came out, and we used to have to go to meetings with multiple laptops because they would break. Like they were so flunky. I remember, and I put like SimCity on my laptop. And then
I love that.
And then had to
the classic.
Throw it to the side and just bring out the second one. Like half your luggage was laptops.
Oh my gosh.
Those are big too. Those are not small machines.
They were heavy, and it was like the first color monitor on a laptop.
Yeah.
So the pixels would bust, and but yeah, that was kind of like what I was thinking about when the journey started. And I was, out of college. I had a brief time in politics. I went to D.C. and worked Clinton Gore, and
oh wow,
yeah, local U.S. senator. Dating myself once again, right? Not Obama. The far
yeah.
And then after that, still passionate about technology, and it was, the internet just started, and it was a great time to get a job. You basically, qualification was like, you have to have a pulse, right?
Right.
I went on an interview, and like right after the interview, I was like, well, I'm really interested. And they're like, well, over there's your desk. And I was like,
oh my gosh.
I like walked over, and they're like, just start. And I'm like, what?
All right, here we go.
It's like that easy. And then one of my first customers was Amazon, and they only had like 200 employees, books, just books. And it was personalization that I was working with them on. And it was called collaborative filtering. So it was kind of like early-ish AI. So it was basically, saying if people bought this book, you're in a group of other people who then liked this book, right? And it was by title and author. Yeah, then I, got extremely excited because I was like, wow, I mean, you guess what book I like? That's pretty cool, crazy.
Yeah.
That was like my first taste of like, what AI was capable of.
It's amazing how far back the roots of AI go. I don't think people recognize that it obviously ChatGPT was this new novel interface and approach, but it really has been building for a long, long time.
Well, I'm fond of saying that AGI was invented on AOL because of that reason. It's mostly just poetic license. When we look back in 30 years and do the history of all this, I think that we're gonna kind of pin the advent of AI a little bit earlier than we would right now, just because of we're probably gonna associate it with essentially the rise of algorithmic content in general. Right? It's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. You have the Turing machine whenever that was, like in the 40s, it was actually they're still using it like as a benchmark, especially in robotics, to say if it can pass the Turing test as a robot, then the capabilities are there, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Right after Amazon, I can remember I went and worked with Barnes and Noble, and it was the same thing. It was like collaborative filtering, recommending books. I remember being in a meeting, and they were tracking on the New York City subway how many people were using a Kindle and not reading a hard copy. The first week, they came into the board meeting, and they're like, don't worry, 1%. Everybody still got books. And then the second week, they're like, oh yeah, it's a little bit more. Then like the third week, they're like, it's 25%. They're like, oh no, it's like 50. Like in a month, it went from 0 to 50.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was another. That showed and we're seeing it now, how rapid it can.
Yeah, I was just about to say. So you're no stranger then to witnessing, technologies that take off really rapidly in adoption. It's interesting that I see a very common sentiment reflected on social media and in media in general as well. AI is quote unquote, the tech revolution that no one asked for. But when you look at the user numbers, it's a very, very different story. And so I just wonder, when does the dam start to break for some people? There are some people, I read their articles, they're anti-AI. I'm like, there's some tells here. I suspect that you were using Claude, and I just see it sneaking in everywhere. For both good and bad. But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. What do you think is holding people back from kind of admitting that they enjoy AI and that there is, consumer incentive for these AI companies to exist?
Yeah, well, I saw one of your early podcasts that you mentioned that you meet people and they're like, oh yeah, I just tried OpenAI last week, or ChatGPT last week, and you're like,
all the time, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Still happens. Yeah.
Right. And but the thing is, it kind of goes back to this Barnes and Noble Kindle thing. It's moving so fast, right?
Yeah.
That's, one of the reasons I joined the U.S. Artificial Intelligence Institute, because it's moving so fast. There's the, possibility, if not the reality, that a lot of people are going to be left behind, right? There's a chance, I'm not sure, but there could be 20% unemployment, higher. And if we don't look at that now and start on the education process, that could be a reality. And it would be, it's kind of up to us to make sure that that doesn't happen. And we immediately, those people who are like, oh, I just gave it a try, right?
Exactly.
I'm curious because I think AI is this incredible two-edged sword where it could either lift the entire population together, or it's going to widen the rift. The rich are going to get richer and the poor will get poorer. I'm like, what are you and the U.S. Artificial Intelligence Institute, what are you trying to do to avoid the latter to hopefully improve the life of everybody?
Yeah, one of the things we're seeing is in a country, let's say like Malaysia, the entire country also has the opportunity to lift itself up. And the government is smart enough to say, okay, we're going to train our employees, train our citizens, train our students. And they have the opportunity to, become a world power. So it's kind of it can level all playing fields for countries, states, sovereigns.
I'm so glad you brought that example up, because I was literally telling Jake in a text right before we jumped on here that, and I don't, apologies to this other podcast, I don't remember what the podcast was because I was talking to a friend, I heard it secondhand. But essentially, there was a podcast, I'm going to look it up later and I'll put it in the description for everybody. But it's essentially the idea that the hosts were discussing was that AI represents potentially the most massive transfer of intellectual property intellectual. I'm going to use property because I can't think of a better word right now, but not strictly legally speaking. Intellectual property from, to borrow the social academic term, the global north to the global south, right? Where suddenly, if you're sitting in Kenya, whereas previously you probably, a lot of these materials that we have access to here in the United States, a lot of these websites, a lot of these legal journals, et cetera, probably were not accessible at all. And now you can at least you have a machine that can reproduce a lot of that material in high enough resolution that it's worth reading. As we all know, we all use the technology. There are significant pitfalls to it. There are hallucinations, etc. But more often than not, it works. And yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I think it's such an overlooked point that if it does get embraced in the right way, people can use it to level the playing field. Anyways, yeah, just had to jump on my soapbox about that for a second.
Yeah, to that point too, it's almost like it's an equalizer as far as education, right?
Yeah.
Now you don't have to go to Harvard because you have in your back pocket a Harvard PhD, right? And I find that in my work too. It's like, I'm not the most technical person. I up to very recently worked in the space industry, and I didn't really have a space background. Obviously, rockets and satellites, it's very technical.
Right.
But I'll tell you, I became much less reliant on the rocket scientists because I can answer a lot of the questions myself that I used to have to go to them for. And I was kind of beholden to them, right? So I would say, hey, I need the response to these 10 questions. And it would be like, what's the satellite? Sensors and the revisit time over the planet. And I was like, listen, I need this in like a week. Could you? And the week would pass. And I was like, oh, come on, we really need this. And then it got to the point where I don't need you at all. I just created this thing in like a day that I used to have to wait 2 weeks for you to do. And it's better than you would have given me.
Yeah. Which is crazy. Like the thought that, that's like the colloquial phrase, right? Like it's not rocket science. And we're literally
with rocket science
using AI. You can duplicate the work of a rocket scientist into an understandable framing for a non-rocket scientist. It's wild what you can do.
Yeah. And these were rocket scientists, right?
Yeah.
So I was asking questions to rocket scientists, and I don't have to be a rocket scientist to be able to answer their questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
So on a slightly shifting gears here, you've said that AI literacy should be a fundamental right. What, in your opinion, would a world look like where that's true? What are kind of like some of the first changes you'd expect to see made in pursuit of that goal?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think one of the first steps to get towards that is, why doesn't a country, and there's kind of rumors out there that Saudi Arabia has done this, But why does the country just buy a OpenAI $20 a month license for like every citizen, right? And supposedly Saudi Arabia is doing it. It hasn't, I've read some places that it's already happened, but it hasn't been confirmed. So you start there, right? Everybody's got the license, right? And then from there, based on sector, based on position, it's like everybody's now equal, right? Everybody's, a PhD. And what happens in a world like that? I don't know. Right?
Yeah.
Nobody knows.
So what do you think is the
no idea.
Like what differentiates it's what comes to mind is, I don't know if you've seen the movie The Incredibles, where the villain, he says once everybody's super, no one is, and that's like his evil plan, is to make everybody a superhero. So I'm curious, taking that, applying it to AI, what do you think is then going to differentiate? Like, what comes to mind is art. If everybody can be an artist, what is art? If everyone can be a rocket scientist, what makes a great rocket scientist then? Like, what do you think starts to differentiate greatness when all of this is available?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, can I use that example because it's pretty awesome?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Incredibles, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like when the playing field is even, I mean, is it just who can prompt the best? And if so, does the U.S. Artificial Intelligence Agency just teach people how to prompt, right? I think, one of the things we're focusing on is educating people beyond the buzzwords, right? Like every industry has buzzwords, technical buzzwords like training and parameters and tokens, and that becomes intimidating, right? But people in the industry like it, right? Because it makes us feel smart, right? We know what token is, right? But
right.
sort of, right? So then, you got to get past that, because I think that's intimidating, right? Like a whole dictionary of words that they don't understand that language. So I think we need to get them, don't use those words, right? Explain it to like what you're explaining to a third grader, right? And if you explain it that way, then then the entire population can get past that, initial hurdle of being intimidated.
Yeah, it's a sticky problem to solve. I think that one of the important things, maybe an underrated thing in my opinion, is just the proliferation of good AI art. There's been a lot of AI videos, etc., posted, everywhere. But in my opinion, none of them has like really, been compelling. And so I think that a major turning point for AI art will be, well, AI in general will be when, someone makes a hit single with using Suno, something like that, right? And I think that increasingly people are getting there. I have a little TikTok account that I've been doing recently that's all AI generated videos that I did with VO3, and they're doing pretty well. It's really funny because I label every single one of them as AI because like I don't want to get my video struck down or anything. I don't want to deal with that. But inevitably, I always have one or two people commenting on every video. It's like, this is AI, guys. Look out. This is AI. I'm like, yeah.
I told you.
Yeah. It's right there in the title. But I'd be curious, have you seen, do you have your finger on the pulse at all in the art world, and the use of AI there?
Yeah. I saw a podcast recently, and the guest was Brian Eno, and he said, hey, the same thing happened to me 50 years ago when I used the Moog synthesizer 56 plus, right?
Yeah.
They're like, you're cheating, right? You're not using a guitar, right? So he's like, it's the same thing. It's an available tool to make music, and he's followed all of those new releases of available tools. So just another one.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think this is like a bigger thing that I feel like keeps coming up for some reason as we've talked, Spencer, that this is a new technology, but this is not a new process we're going through. This process of technological upheaval we should have like a playbook for this. Like since the wheel, this has been happening, and for everyone to be all crazed about it still, I think speaks to human nature, how fast we forget, and also how scared we can become of something new. But the same principles we've applied in the past have to be applied now. There's nothing crazy going on here.
Maybe it's just like, it's a recency thing, right? That
Mm-hmm.
we think this is extremely big. Obviously, I think it's extremely big and probably the biggest thing that's ever happened. But maybe it's only because it's recent, right? Maybe the same thing society went the same thing when anesthesia was invented, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were like, wait, I don't have to be cut open and feel pain. They're probably like,
right.
This is magic, right?
What is this witchery? Yeah.
Where there's an interview with David Bowie I think it was in the late 80s, where he's talking about the internet and he's talking about how his experience with the internet made him feel like he was interacting with an artificial being, like something else entirely. So I've wondered if there's some of that as well here with artificial intelligence, where people are using it and it's a little bit of a too spooky a feeling for them. Exciting, but at the same time getting into uncanny valley territory, right? Where the lines between reality and the internet become just thinner and thinner by the minute. And whether you think that's good or bad, I think it's a reality that you have to reckon with and you have to confront.
Well, one of the tragedies now is that, or just popped in my head, one of the I find tragic is like David Bowie is not alive right now to use this technology.
He would love AI. Either that or he would hate it and we would get something interesting out of it. Either way.
Yeah, right.
You would love it. I have an interesting David Bowie story. So I lived kind of near him in New York City. And the one thing about him, he lived in New York City for like 20 years. Nobody actually saw him. So he moved amongst people, but no one ever was, he'd be at a restaurant.
Interesting.
He went to a same coffee shop like every day, but nobody at the coffee shop ever really saw him. So he was for 20 years and no like David Bowie sightings, no like David Bowie stories. Just kind of cool. He was like, maybe he had that.
Just an enigma.
Yeah. Huh.
Well, I lived near Lou Reed and I'd see the guy every day.
Well, Mike, I'm curious. So you're on this mission to educate the world, help everybody become educated in AI. What's the starting point? Like, what does this curriculum look like to upskill the population?
Yeah. So one thing that's important, it's for different levels. So there's a whole program for K through 12, and there's another program for higher ed. Then there within corporations or within governments, there's based on knowledge base. So there's a program for C-level people that's high level. There's a program for technical people, and it's a certification. So basically, it's self-paced. There's videos and books and content. Then there's an assessment that they have to graduate from. And then in the higher levels, they also have to submit like a transformation plan, which is pretty cool to actually look through some of those. And at the end, they get, USAII certified, and then they can use that throughout their career. So if you're a high school grad, you can use it to get into college. If you're in college, you can use it to get a better job. If you're at a job, you can use it to hopefully get a better job. And then outside professional life, you can, manage, as you know, ton of personal things beyond tasks.
So kind of slightly tangential to this, but following up on this, one thing that has been interesting to watch with the internet and internet safety is there's kind of a very narrow band of people demographically that have learned to be safe on the internet, right? It's kind of like younger, I believe the age range is like younger Gen X through the millennials, are pretty good at avoiding online scams. But then outside of those ranges, both younger and older are very, very vulnerable to online scams. And so in some ways, I think that we've kind of lost like the internet safety debate along the way, right? Like at some point we just kind of stopped doing it. And so I'd be interested to hear, in your perspective, what are some things that we could do to potentially, and obviously, you know, we can't foresee the future completely, but what do you think are some things that we can do to avoid this happening with AI?
Yeah, I think it's on the education side, right? So if people feel comfortable or understand its capabilities, they can maybe easily identify a deep fake, right? There's part of the training and education process in general is like saying, okay, is this video real? Is this not? And trying to get better at that. You know, it sounds basic and simple, but you know, going through that process can be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just start at basics and start them young.
Yeah. It's important. I mean, with my kids at home, right? It's a struggle, right? Even though they know I work in this, you know, I work in AI, you know, there's still on you know, at their 10, 11, there's still a difficulty for them because it's not even their fault. It's not really being taught to them in school. I even say, you know, I say to them, if somebody has a problem at your school that you're using AI for your homework, call me, right? I'll be like, listen, you know, they're going to use AI to do their homework. They should use AI to do their homework.
Yeah,
and
right.
If you've got a problem with that, you know, you're behind, right? It's the same thing. Can you remember? I saw a Saturday Night Live episode, and they were like, "Oh, don't use internet for your homework." Now you think like, what? Not use the internet for your homework?
Yeah,
it's the same thing.
Absurd.
We can tell if you use the internet for this. You know, now it's ridiculous.
Yeah. So how do you? I'm sure you received feedback, both positive and negative here, but how do you marry the traditional education system of developing individuals, developing those internal skills and knowledge banks with AI? I know that's a huge concern. We've had some professors on, teachers, where it is a concern that people they'll no longer have the internal knowledge because they can just rely on AI, similar to, you know, we've had Google forever, but AI is just kind of the next level of that. How do you marry that? How do you help individuals continue to progress personally while also involving AI?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the answer to this, but I've thought about it quite a bit. And it's almost like when the calculator was first invented, everybody was like, oh, you'll never learn your times tables, right? 7 times 7's 49, right? But it's like, so what? Why do you even have to know that? So I think that it's going to be the creativity of the prompting, right? To be able to say, okay, answer this question. Okay, now frame it based on this thought process. No, refine it here. Add this part because I think this is going to be important. And then obviously when you're done with that is reviewing the material, making your own human-based changes and coming with an output that would be better than 100 people could create.
Yeah, I think that another thing, following up on that, and I think that David Wood, professor at BYU, made this point as well. I think that one thing that we're going to see in education is we're going to have to start probably challenging students a little bit more in different ways, right? Give them more challenging problems to work on, problems that force them to think through the problem a little bit first before they're able to even prompt the AI, right? I mean, I deal with a lot of those problems at work, right? Because I'm a developer, and you know, I'm working on some new platforms right now that are requiring me to stitch things together in ways that, are not commonly found online, right? And so I'm having to think through everything that I do before I go in and I say, hey, I need you to implement this plan for me, right? Because, nobody's writing code by themselves these days. Who cares? I don't care about writing the code. I just want to plan it. And another thing that I think we'll see is I think that we'll see the rise of like handwritten essays again. For two reasons. Like one, like there is a time and place for LLM usage in AI, in education, and then there's a time and place for them, not to be used, right? And I think that sometimes you got to have students demonstrate their own thinking truly and fully their own thinking, right? And so I think that we'll see greater use of in class, writing assessments, things like that.
The handwritten will be verifiable, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So we're now we go back to that.
And then there's also a lot of studies around memory and knowledge retention regarding computer usage and typing versus handwriting, showing that writing something out by hand, you remember it a lot better than if you were typing it out. And personally, I'm a full digital native. I think that those studies are probably a little bit overblown. I do everything on the computer, but when I step back and I look at it, I'm like, yeah, I can see the merit and I can see the argument there. It'll be really interesting to see what happens. There's a guy that I am friends with on Twitter, Max Spaeth. He has a company called Pangram, and they offer AI detection, and they partner with a lot of schools to do this. But one, his AI detection, better than anything else I've used. Like, this is not a paid ad. Like, genuinely, it works. And two, we've had a lot of really interesting discussions, he and I, about just the nature of AI and its role in the education environment. And essentially his take is that he doesn't actually like oppose AI at all in the education environment. That's not why he's building this company. He actually is very, very supportive of it, but he believes that teachers need to have the tools to be able to properly evaluate, their students. And part of that is, you got to know if someone's using a calculator on a math test or not, right? So you got to know if someone's using AI on a writing assessment or not. And then from there, it's up to the teacher to decide whether that's something that they allow and they just, raise the standard for what is good writing from a student, or if it's something that they don't like and they're like, hey, you got to redo this. Lots of interesting questions ahead.
Yeah, that's a great point, because something like this happened to me this morning. I had a meeting with someone last week where they then had to really think about the role they were going to play in the organization. So they came up with a document and they're like, this is the role I think I could play. I looked at it. I'm like, wait a minute. He AI'd the whole thing. He didn't really even think about it. So then I was like, I'm going to AI him back. So I took it and I said, ask questions based on his ideas. So then I hit send, AI to back a bunch of like questions that were obviously AI. He could then take my questions and answer them in AI. And then I could have further clarification in AI. It'll be just, you could tell, I could tell immediately. And I know he can tell too, the way I asked my specific questions, like, oh, can you further explain to me how you work this?
It's not just a role. It's a transformational business opportunity.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's going to be very intriguing to see which organizations move first. I've been a little discouraged with the education system that it's been so slow. I mean, I can't blame it. Lots of industries and organizations are moving very slowly, and the education system's not known to be pivoting very quickly. But Mike, I'm curious if you have any thoughts on this as you've been pushing this cause worldwide. What's missing? Like what's missing on a worldwide scale or just a macroeconomic scale that's preventing governments, school systems from actively teaching artificial intelligence?
Well, the thing is like, what if a country does, right? What if a country not to name countries, but what if a country gives out the OpenAI ChatGPT license for $20 a month, and then they totally revamp their education system, scrap it, start from zero? They have the ability to be a world power if they're not a world power anyway, right? So it's almost like, hey, this is a chance for everybody to every country, every government to participate. Scrap the existing educational system, give everybody the license, and you can compete. Who knows what will happen? So it's in the US, I don't, it's going to be hard. It's been done the same way for a long time. Still taking penmanship, right?
Yeah. On that note, and in the US, this isn't as much of a problem, but how do you view, it seems like perhaps a precursor to, universal AI literacy is universal internet access. How do you view that in the context of the US? I mean, increasingly we're almost getting free Wi-Fi just by default of it, lots of unsecured Wi-Fi everywhere, but it's not strictly a public utility or etc. Right? Do you believe that that's something that we would need to accomplish first, or do you think that they are kind of co-concurrent goals where it's like, hey, just start rolling out AI usage to everybody, and as people get internet access, they also get AI?
Yeah,
more the latter.
That should happen, right?
Yeah.
It will happen, and maybe it's that same country that says everybody gets a license, everybody gets internet access. We totally revamped our education system. It's going to take off, no matter who it is, and it's possible.
Yeah.
With Starlink now, that country signs an agreement with Starlink. Automatically, everybody gets wireless.
Right. Yeah, I was going to bring that up. Like, I have my friends and everyone I know will know that I have many disagreements with Elon Musk, but the potential of Starlink to reach, underprivileged communities is really powerful. And I hope that it's something that he leans into more. If there's any chance that he's listening to this, lean into it more, Elon. Do that. Because it's just amazing that, I could be sitting in the Australian outback and, I can be chatting with my computer 200,000 miles away, whatever it is. I don't want to do the math right now. I don't remember how big the Earth is. So with that in mind, one of the kind of big differentiators right now with AI is access to large infrastructure, right? Do you think that we could potentially be seeing something similar to what is with personal, with personal space launches, where eventually the infrastructure gets to a point that Jake could go train a GPT-4 sized model for relatively cheap? Or do you think that it'll continue consolidating?
Yeah, I think the need for GPUs, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's such a backlog and demand. Like, coming from the space industry only months ago, we work very closely with Amazon and Microsoft and Google GPUs for some of the processing of the satellite data, the Earth observation data, and even these companies couldn't even get GPUs. Like, you work with Microsoft and Google, the employees are like, I can't get them, so no way I'm giving them to you.
Yeah.
Like, how do you not have them? It's basically you're scrounging for these GPUs. There's a reason that damn stock is so high, right? When you get this demand for this friggin' piece of metal, you're like, wow.
Yeah, wild.
Yeah. So that's not gonna, it's not gonna change, right? It's just, I don't know. I mean, are we going to be able to run train models on our laptop? I don't know.
I know it's funny. All of our conversations, I think, on this podcast, typically, we'll have a guest on in whatever area, whatever industry, and we talk, and we discuss, and it kind of comes down to, we'll have to see. This is so new, and we're in uncharted territory that it's like, yeah, we have all these cool, unique perspectives, and it comes down to it, and it's like, we haven't really seen anything like this. This is another animal.
Nobody knows what's going to happen, right? No one can get up there and say, oh, I think this is, I know this will happen.
Yeah.
I'm really excited 10 years from now to come back and rewatch all of our podcast episodes. Maybe we'll still be going by then, who knows? But come back and rewatch all of these episodes and see how many of the predictions and prognostications were on point and how many of them were just wildly incorrect.
Right. I mean, just the future is so exciting for me. I just saw this whole article about, maybe you've heard of it, Mike, because you're in the space, but Alpha School in Texas. Have you heard of this? So it's a school that has completely integrated AI into their curriculum. So the students get all of the traditional, so it's completely tailored to every single student. So they're continually taking assessments and all these things, and it's like all of your education is done through AI for 2 hours a day. So in 2 hours, these students are able to get all of the traditional education that they need, and the rest of the day, so they're still at school. They go to the school building. They have 2 hours of traditional learning, and the rest of the time they spend in pursuit of other interests, whether that's painting, music, all of these things, which I'm just getting so excited about this now, because this is one of the reasons I'm so excited about AI, is because if you think about that, okay, students in the past would go to school for 6-7 hours a day.
Right.
This is, now you involve AI, that shrinks to 2 hours. All of a sudden there's 4 hours a day. Some parents would be like, ugh, my kid's home for 4 more hours. No, they can now do so much more. Think of what kind of capacity that frees up for these students. And that's just in this one example. This will continue to happen over and over in every single industry, where time will be opened up to enable us to now progress. It's the same thing. I was just talking about this with my wife over dinner because it was her birthday, and I spent literally the whole day making this dinner. And we got to dinner. We have a 1-year-old, and we got to dinner and we sat down, and I was like, man, this dinner is great, but this was all day. Yeah. And I didn't even have to go catch the chicken that I cooked. I went to the store and bought this. And over time, society has shifted where we, all of a sudden cities are a thing. You can go to the store and buy food, and now we have more time. And that's the commodity that really matters, is time. That's what helps the human race progress, is where a technological development arises. It cuts down the time investment necessary for our current way of life, and we're then able to progress farther. And I just think AI is the key. That's what's going to help us now elevate to the next level.
Yeah, they must.
We got to invest in the right ways of using it. Just had to add that caveat because I have to every time we talk about it.
It must have been thinking the same way, though, like when the tractor came out, right?
Yeah.
But obviously it's not a podcast. They're all sitting on the porch and they're like, this tractor is going to change everything, right?
Yeah.
No longer do I have to be out there for 12 hours. Now I can
think about when like the bronze plow hit the agora in ancient Greece, I bet that was crazy.
Earth shattering.
Oh my God. They were like, goodness, now I have all this free time in the world, right? And then that got built. Then they had to make the plow.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, this is my only prediction I'm going to make. When we look back, it's a great idea to look back 10 years. We'll all do it. And I think like 3-day work week, 4-day work week, I think that's going to happen, right? I think universal basic income is going to happen, right? And it's almost like COVID was the first test. Send everybody a check. Okay, we got the process in place. Because if we do hit 20% employment, that's gonna have to happen. I
was gonna say, you need to start trying some exotic things economically at that point. You got to go places that few economists have ever dared to go. I cannot speak right now, apparently.
No, it's so true.
Like at school, right? The school day is only 3 hours, right? So, that's there's nothing else you're going to do. You're going to get this free time. You're going to take it. You're going to have a better life. Do what you passionate about as a result. But it's the same thing with people, in the field when the tractor came out, right? Before, sleep, eat, work, sleep, eat, work. Nope, 7 days a week. You had to, right? And all of a sudden they had all that free time. They're like, whoa, I do. So
I love
as
that.
we're starting to get to the end, I have one more hard question for you. So recently, I saw a study that found that AI has increased productivity for workers at work, but those productivity gains have not carried over to the companies themselves, which sort of indicates to me that people are essentially, doing less work, but achieving the same productivity. How do we convince companies to then invest in reskilling their employees into AI while avoiding, massive unemployment? Is your opinion just like, it's the unemployment is probably just coming? Or do you think that there is a way that we can avoid, the path where we do have to have massive UBI in the near term?
I think, like personally, in my case, it's easier to go through the task list, right? Like, okay, these are the things I need to complete. But the task list is, in a lot of ways, is endless. And now I can add to the task list things that I never could imagine that I ever get to, because I'm like so underwater with these tasks, right? So now I can actually think instead of like checkbox checking off the tasks. And I think over time, even though maybe they're not seeing the ROI immediately, right? All of a sudden a new product is invented because somebody had an extra hour, right? To think about.
It's very common at Google. I mean, Google had for a long time, I don't know if they still do this, but for a long time, their Fridays were pretty much wholly dedicated to just wacky projects. And I'm sure that I could come up with some examples, but they are evading me right now. But a lot of the big Google products came out of just, hack sessions, essentially.
Yeah, that's one of the coolest things they ever did, right?
They're like, I love Google.
Yeah.
Like, one
I
day,
am so Google brained.
these crazy moonshots, right? Probably if they look at all those crazy moonshots, it probably was billions of dollars.
Say one of those crazy moonshots was attention is all you need, and that's led us to where we are today with LLMs, seriously, right? Like bringing things full circle.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, yeah, we need more of that mentality for sure. Mike, as we're wrapping up, you have a unique perspective on this. So what advice would you give to individuals who are not actively using AI, who need educated? Where should they start? What should they do? What advice would you give?
Yeah, I think listening to podcasts, like yours, right? Self-educating. Like you have the ability, not to plug you guys. Check you check.
Nailed it. Yeah.
No, just like, watch a podcast. Seriously. I mean, listen to a podcast, but you're cooking, turn it on, right? Listen, self-educate, right? Everybody has the opportunity. The playing field is level, right? Because of what you guys are doing. People can just YouTube, AI, podcast, boom. And it's all
Andrej Karpathy, and I may have mispronounced his first name, who was at OpenAI for a long time, right? He has it's like a 2-hour video that's just a really good beginner's breakdown of what language models are and how they work. I highly recommend everyone go watch it. Because I believe very strongly everybody needs just at least a base level of understanding of this technology moving forward. Like it's critical.
You bring that up, Andrej Karpathy. Yeah. That's exactly where I started.
And is it really?
That was like so refreshing that somebody so smart can make it so digestible.
No, exactly. I was really impressed with the way he breaks it down. Because it's hard for technical guys like him to break it down. Both because they're science brained people, and science brained people are not often communication brained. And second, because a lot of the topics and concepts are pretty complex. So, anyways, very, very good video. Everyone go watch it.
Yeah,
definitely.
Love that. Well, Mike, it's been great having you on. I think the cause you're pushing is crucial. Yeah. If there's anything we can do, please let us know. I think everybody needs a baseline. This is earth-shattering, what's happening around us right now with AI. And It's important. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Good time to be alive, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It's very, at a bare minimum, it's interesting. Bare minimum.
Yep.
And I'd rather be living during interesting times than boring ones personally.
Yeah.
But I get why
100%.
people get tired of it.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm once again huge fan. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. We'll stay in contact.
Yes.